everyone. On behalf of my colleagues with the Rehab Data Work Group, I'd like to thank CSAVR and all of you for the opportunity to present today on other measures that matter. To begin with, I'd like to introduce the members of our Rehab Data Work Group. First, we have Christopher Pope, who is the Chief of the Data Collection and Analysis Unit with the Rehabilitation Services Administration. And I am Suzanne Mitchell. I'm the Chief of the VR Program Unit in RSA. I'd like to introduce Rachel Anderson, who is the TA and Training Lead for San Diego State University, as well as Bill Colombo, who is the Deputy Director for the Michigan Rehabilitation Services. I'd also like to introduce Adam Leonard, who is the Director for the Division of Operational Insight with the Texas Workforce Commission, and Kristen Mackey, who is the Administrator for Arizona Rehabilitation Services Administration. Please also welcome Scott Dennis. Scott Dennis, as a member of our team, is the Assistant State Superintendent for the Division of Rehabilitation Services with the Maryland State Department of Education. And last but not least, Natasha Jurdy, who is the Director of State Services for the Blind for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. RSA formed the Rehab Data Work Group primarily as a result of an initiative of the Rethink VR Performance, which took place a year or so ago. And this was to propose other measures that could be used by state VR agencies and all of us to evaluate VR program performance in terms of its effectiveness and efficiency in service delivery, and help to assess the extent to which programs are providing opportunities to maximize employment for individuals with disabilities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who is going to talk a little more about the purpose of the Rehab Data Work Group. Chris?
Thanks, Suzanne. In addition to developing tools that VR agencies may use to look at their data, one of the charges of the Rehab Data Work Group was to develop the other measures that matter. And the purpose of these other measures that matter is to guide VR agencies and RSA as we collectively focus on performance specific to VR, and we define attributes of a successful VR program. So you'll notice that these measures have a VR bent to them, and that's what we wanted, because sometimes the WIOA common performance measures don't always resonate with the VR field. So we hope that these do. That said, the other measures that matter do not replace the 6 primary indicators of performance under WIOA. We'll continue to share data on those and continue to grow with those measures as they evolve. The good news about the other measures that matter is that they don't require any additional data collection or reporting. We're able to use existing RSA 911 data to populate each of these 6 measures. A guiding principle of the other measures that matter is that accurate data collection and reporting leads to high quality data that lead to insights and continuous improvement for the VR program. In other words, if data are the building blocks of evidence, we want to use data and evidence in our decision-making to continue to improve the program and see it grow. A guiding principle of the other measures that matter is that accurate data collection and reporting leads to high quality data that lead to insights and continuous improvement. In other words, if data are the building blocks of evidence, we want to use that data and that evidence to continue to grow the program and make data-informed decisions. One of the things the Rehab Data Work Group did in developing the other measures that matter is develop value statements associated with each measure that affirm the significance of the measure to the mission of the VR program. We believe that if VR programs across the country share these values with us, that performance across these measures and the WIOA indicators will reflect the success of the program. It'll help us tell the story of VR and continue to show its value to people with disabilities. So, as I mentioned, there are 6 other measures that matter. The first is sustaining employment after exit. The next 3 measures are actually profiles that include a variety of metrics within them. There's a profile on quality employment, VR process efficiency, VR service provision. The 5th measure is actually one that's related to WIOA, and it's the percent of participants enrolled in an education or training program that could lead to a recognized credential or employment. In other words, the percent eligible of VR program participants who could earn a measurable skill gain. The 6th measure is also a profile related to pre-employment transition services and the students with disabilities who receive them through the VR program. The first measure is sustaining employment after exit. This measure is defined as the percent of VR program participants who are employed at the time they exit the VR program and who are also employed in the 2nd and 4th quarters after they've exited the VR program. So more or less, it's a retention measure of all 3 phases. The value statement the Rehab Data Work Group developed for this measure is that VR program participants should sustain employment after they exit the program. Our goal, as it always has been, is that individuals with disabilities should continue working after they've received VR services. So this slide shows some data related to the sustaining employment after exit measure. The data here represents those individuals who exited the VR program in calendar year 2018. And you'll see that almost 148,000 individuals with disabilities left the VR program with employment in that time frame. And we've tracked whether those individuals with disabilities sustained employment in both the 2nd and 4th quarters after exit. And you'll see that close to 93,000 of them did. They were employed when they left, and they were employed in the 2nd quarter after their exit and the 4th quarter after they had exited. And this accounts for about 63% of individuals with disabilities who left with a job sustained that employment for at least a year after they had moved on from VR. Now I'm going to turn things over to Bill to discuss the 2nd measure. Bill?
Thank you, Chris, and hello, everybody. The measure and data profile I'd like to introduce is titled Quality Employment. By definition, this profile will provide information related to employment status at exit and 4 quality indicators of employment across subpopulations, including primary disability, significance of disability, and students with disabilities. This profile is based on the following value statement. The mission of the VR program is to maximize employment opportunities for all individuals with disabilities, including those with the most significant disabilities, and to assist individuals with disabilities to achieve economic self-sufficiency. Unlike Chris, who shared a little bit of data, as you can see, the depth and value of this profile exceeds a brief introduction. However, a quick overview shows the far left column identifying subpopulations by primary disability, significance of disability, and students with disabilities. The top row or header includes foundational employment data at exit and the following employment indicator types: median hour earnings at exit, median hours worked per week at exit, and number with health insurance at exit, and number with Social Security benefits at exit. In Michigan, we'll use this profile and other data sources like our comprehensive statewide needs assessment as a roadmap to pinpoint where resource investments and program development activities may be needed. Plus, the 4 quality employment indicator types represent a gauge to monitor effectiveness and show improvement over time. As a primary goal under WIOA is to provide individuals with disabilities the services that they need to compete for and achieve high quality employment in a 21st century global economy. We believe this data set has value in assessing progress towards that end and look forward to sharing the tool. Now, I'd like to hand off to Kristen Mackey to talk about the next measure that matters.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. So this profile will talk about the VR process efficiency. When we look at the efficiency of the VR programs, the profile provides information related to how efficiently individuals with disabilities are determined eligible for the VR program and receive an IPE. The profile also has the added benefit of showing the outcomes of these individuals that they achieved if they exited in that program year. So when we look at the value is timely and effective customer service leads to high quality, competitive, integrated employment outcomes. This has been demonstrated in research, and we know that anecdotally from our own work in the field. So we know that being engaged with applicants and eligible individuals with disabilities and offering assistance early and often throughout those eligibility and IPE development processes attribute to good customer service and also positive employment outcomes. So this is a 2-part profile. First, we'll look at the application to eligibility. The profile will provide the number of individuals who applied, those who were determined eligible, and those who were determined eligible without needing an extension. So we're all familiar with the compliance perspective of this profile, but what we'd also like to draw attention to is the number of days after application to determine eligibility. So 60 days is the total goal, right? But sooner and more efficiency is really the desired goal. And so what you'll see is 30 days after application, the number of individuals from 31 days to 60 days, and then 61 days plus after application. You'll also be provided with the number, the percentages for those individuals, and then the number of who exited with and without employment. For the second part, we'll take a look at the next transactional process, which is eligibility to IPE development. Again, you'll be provided with the number of individuals who had IPEs developed in a given program year, and take a look again at the days, 30 days after eligibility, 31 to 60 days, 61 to 90 days, or 91 plus days after eligibility. You'll see the total number of IPEs developed, those percentages developed within those timelines, and the numbers that are exited with and without employment. So in Arizona, we use this metric to really drive home the number of days to determine application and eligibility. We want those number of days to be as short as possible in order to allow for that rapid, efficient engagement with clients to support their total and ultimate successful outcome in VR program. So now I'll be handing it off to Suzanne to talk about the next measure that matters.
Thank you, Kristen. In keeping with the theme of engagement, we believe that it's very important to look at VR service provision in keeping individuals engaged. So the next table includes the number of program participants who actually received a VR service during a particular quarter, and that will be compared with the number of individuals who are participants to achieve a percentage. And this is done, we've done this both on a quarterly and an annual basis for program year 19. We believe that active participation and engagement in continuing to receive services can result in the VR program participants achieving competitive integrated employment. And obviously, we would hope to see less attrition with more engagement and the provision of VR services. So you'll see here that we have 4 quarters and then the annual figures, with the top line showing the number of participants receiving a VR service, one or more VR services in that quarter, and then the number of participants within that quarter, which results in the third line, which is the percentage of individuals who have received services. You might note that in the 4th quarter of program year 19, that there was a pretty good decrease in the percentage. And that could be due to a number of factors, one of which might be the effect of COVID-19, the pandemic. Another explanation for some of these percentages might be that VR agencies are not reporting all services, particularly those that may be provided in-house or that might be comparable services. So there are other factors that may present in terms of this data. We would hope that VR agencies will work to provide more accurate data related to their service provision. And if that is the case, we would hope to see those percentages go up. You'll notice that the annual percentage is higher, and it reflects across all 4 quarters. So an individual may have received a service in one quarter, but not the other quarters, and that figures in again to the overall program year percentage. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
At the beginning, Chris was talking about how these other measures sometimes are related to some of the official measures in statute. And this is one of those measures. We're focusing on the percent of participants who are eligible to receive a measurable skills gain. So we're focused on the same population that's in the measurable skills gain denominator. But here what we're trying to do is relate that to the overall universe. So the measure is looking at the number of VR program participants who could earn a measurable skills gain because they were in some type of training or education program or services that are intended to result in either a recognized post-secondary credential or employment. And then that is divided by the total number of participants who were being served in the program. So if you kind of relate it back to the original measure, the numerator for this measure is going to be the measurable skills gain rate denominator. So the people who are in measurable skills gain denominator are the people who are considered to be on this type of a pathway for this measure. And then the denominator are the total number of participants who are being served during the year. In terms of the value proposition, the idea here, of course, is that if individuals with disabilities have more opportunities to earn recognized credentials, they're much more likely to achieve a high quality, competitive, integrated employment as their outcome. So this is really a measure that kind of focuses on the degree to which we are moving people towards that end through education, training, and other activities. Here we see program year 2019 performance outcomes on this measure. So we have 257,606 people who were in the measurable skills gain rate denominator, meaning that they were in some kind of education or training program during the course of the program year that's intended to result in a recognized post-secondary credential or employment. And the total number of people served across all programs or all states is just under 873,000 people. So that's 29.5% of the people that we served in program year 19 who were in some type of activity that would allow them the opportunity, at least, to gain a measurable skills gain. And one of the things that I think we're going to have to look at on this is that we're going to get all this data state by state, and we're going to see the range of values. But I want to caution people to realize that some of this is going to be based on your case mix. So to the degree that you're serving younger people, you would tend to see or hope to see a higher percentage of people in this measure. Whereas if you have a rather older population or people who already have significant credentials in place, then it may not be appropriate for them to be in those types of activities again here. So it's still about the unique needs of the customer and the case mix. And so what good looks like is going to vary a little bit from state to state and over time. So from here, I'm going to hand it off to Rachel, who's going to talk about our last measure.
Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to share our final measure on pre-employment transition services. Many of you have started to look at your data, analyzing the effectiveness of your implementation, the impact on both your program and students with disability outcomes, and trying to figure out what's next. So we knew that analyzing pre-employment transition services had to be on the list of other measures that matter to VR. Now, keep in mind, we only have specific pieces of data that each VR agency collects, which is the basis for the profiles we've developed. We know that many agencies have established other ways to collect and track data, which added to these RSA 911 profiles will make it even more valuable. These profiles will provide information related to students with disabilities who received pre-employment transition services and the number of students with disabilities who advance from potentially eligible status to VR program participant status, meaning they're now receiving those pre-employment transition services under an IPE, and their outcomes. This data may be used to evaluate the relationship between the provision of an agency's pre-employment transition services, movement in the VR process, and employment outcomes. We identified the value as early career exploration through pre-employment transition services increases the likelihood of achieving high quality, competitive, integrated employment. On this first profile, we are looking at program year 19 national data for students with disabilities, including the receipt of services, and in some instances, comparing it to the total number of participants in the VR program. For example, on the fourth row, the data shows the percentage of potentially eligible students with disabilities who receive pre-employment transition services is 39.4%. This can mean a variety of things and probably depends on the agency. Maybe one agency provides the bulk of their pre-employment transition services in the summertime, and not all potentially eligible students with disabilities participate each summer. Or some agencies could have provided multiple services to these students in previous program years. And even though they still meet the definition of a student with a disability, they have not identified a need for further services or application for VR. Another scenario could be the tracking and reporting of pre-employment transition services not being sufficient. So for example, agencies that are providing bulk services through a contract may not be accurately breaking down the required pre-employment transition services and documenting them sufficiently for each student with a disability who participated. This slide also provides some national data regarding the number of applications to the VR program compared to how many of those applications were from potentially eligible students who had received pre-employment transition services prior to application. So on the seventh row, the data shows the percentage of potentially eligible students with disabilities who applied to the VR program was 9.9% of the total number of VR applications. There could be a lot of reasons for this, some of which is dependent on the agency's implementation of pre-employment transition services, but it's extremely interesting data for each agency to look at least at the local level, and could potentially compare to national or similar program data. There are some additional numbers you can review on this slide, but for sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next profile. We knew it was also important to look at the 5 required services across students with disabilities for both potentially eligible and those receiving pre-employment transition services under an IPE. This can help agencies look at the effects of their implementation, compare to other agencies, and start to measure the potential impact of these services in relationship to employment outcomes at exit. For example, if you look at the last 2 rows, you will see the number of students with disabilities who exited the VR program after IPE, which pre-employment transition service they received, and whether they exited with or without an employment outcome. Though some of the numbers are close, you will see the number of students with disabilities who exited without an employment outcome exceed those who were employed. Some questions you might want to ask here are why and when students with disabilities exit the VR program. Are any of them wanting to or provided opportunities to enroll in post-secondary education or training that could lead to measurable skill gains or credentials? Why are they exiting the program as students? Or what are the intended outcomes of each of these pre-employment transition services, and are these outcomes being met? Though we don't have time to deep dive much further into this data, I want to let you know that our work group is finalizing a tool that includes both of these profiles, national and agency-specific data, and a 3-year comparison for program years 17, 18, and 19. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit to the Q&A session with Chris, Natasha, and Scott.